Our Vote 2024 coverage continues now with retired political science professor and frequent ABC 12 News political contributor, Paul Rozycki. And Paul, thanks so much for joining us today here on Election Day.
It's just one of those exciting days. It's the Super Bowl for political junkies, I guess.
It is indeed. You know, it's Election Day, and of course, millions will vote today on Election Day. But already, just shy of 46% of Michiganders have already cast the ballot, either by in-person early voting or absentee ballot voting. Are you surprised at the early turnout for Michiganders?
Not that much. Frankly, I think people learned during the pandemic that there were some real advantages to early voting. Not only is it more convenient if you've got a job to deal with or kids or things of that nature, but it gives you a chance to study the ballot in a way you can't do when you just walk in cold turkey to the polls. So I think it's going to become more popular as the years go by.
Yeah, I'm an Election Day voter, so I haven't gone yet. You know, I like the drama of Election Day. So
I enjoy the interaction myself in that way, although I did vote early this year, but I do enjoy the interaction at the polls.
Yeah, so let's take a look now, Paul, at the presidential campaigns and their closing arguments, if you will. How do you think both Harris and Trump did with their closing arguments? Was he able to was his message strong enough for Americans to send him back to the White House? And was she able to convince Americans that now is time for a woman to be in the White House?
I've never seen such a sharp contrast in closing arguments. On one hand, you had this dismal view of the nation in crisis, the nation is falling apart. And on the other hand, let's reason together and work things out. The very sharp atmosphere there. My hunch is that the idea of reaching out to other parties is going to sell a little bit better than the dismal view. But again, the polls show it to be very close, toss-up within the margin of error.
Have you ever seen in your many, years, I won't say decades, but years, we know you've been at it a minute. In your many years, have you seen anything quite like this when it comes to polling and with it being so tight?
No, I haven't. It's a unique election in that regard. I've never seen the polling go down to where every poll essentially was within the margin of errors, where it's getting impossible to declare a victor one way or the other, and where the tensions are so high, where people are really squabbling within family and friends over who they're going to vote for.
Yeah, so speaking of polls, let's take a look at one of our exclusive Epic MRA polls, and it shows that Vice President Kamala Harris leading President Trump among Michigan voters by 3 points. Talking about tight, this is clearly within that 4-point margin of error. And do you think this will hold? Do you think Michigan will go blue?
Well, 3 points is better than nothing, and so that's a slight advantage. And if you had to bet today, you'd have to bet on Harris winning it. But again, it's within the margin of error, and we've been surprised before. One problem has been the fact that the past polls in 2016 and 20 underestimated the Trump vote. If that's true this year, that could be a surprise for a lot of people too.
What about, I'm going to throw this in, we didn't talk about this earlier, but what about that Iowa poll?
Absolutely. That's been a good predictor in the past, and that does suggest that Harris has got some momentum behind her and some steam that may carry her to victory.
So, both candidates crisscrossing the state. I think you heard 50-something visits between Harris and Walz to the state of Michigan. Right. I heard Vice President Harris has been here 26 times, herself. And, of course, former Vice President Donald Trump in the state a lot, and J.D. Vance.
The Vice President's been here, for both parties have been here regularly.
Yeah, so does that make a difference?
I think it shows some enthusiasm. In fact, one mistake that Hillary made in 2016 was she didn't come to Michigan much because she felt it was too safe. And I think voters felt, well, gee, she's ignoring us, and people stayed home. So the folks who show up are going to be committed to your candidacy anyhow, but it does show you're interested in that state, and clearly Michigan, as being a toss-up state, is going to make a big difference.
And so we know the stump speeches are over, the rallies are over. What's going to be key now to victory for either one of these candidates, former President Donald Trump or Vice President Kamala Harris?
Turnout for the undecided voters, those very few who are still undecided, and will they turn out to vote, and how are they going to go? That's going to be key, and we may not even know that till late tonight.
All right, Paul is going to stick around with us here on ABC 12 News Hour at noon. In our next half hour with Paul, we'll take a look at Michigan Senate and congressional races.